Welcome to PAATH History. Today we are going to discuss about the origins of feudal structure in Europe. Scholars have tried to explain the rise of feudal structure in Europe in various ways. At the end of 19th century, F.W. Maitland and others tried to discuss about feudalism in Europe. But in 1920s, Henri Pirenne for the first time successfully explained the origin of feudal structure. It was only in the 8th century, that is after the Arab conquests, that the Mediterranean ceased to be the nerve center of the European economy and northern France rose to prominence. This argument was put forward forcefully by Henri Pirenne in his influential work Muhammad and Charlemagne. Pirenne contended that the unity of the Mediterranean, which was so vital for Roman economy, remained more or less intact despite the Germanic invasions. Subsequently, Arab expansion into northern Africa seriously undermined the unity of the Mediterranean. Arab control over the entire southern coastline of Mediterranean Sea, as well as some parts of the eastern and western Mediterranean, fundamentally altered the balance of power in the region. The resulting vacuum was eventually filled by the Carolingian Empire. Medieval society really came into existence with the Carolingians. Pirenne sought to explain the rise of feudalism in terms of the decline of Mediterranean trade following the expansion of the Arab Empire. As a result of that, in the near future, a favorable condition for the rise of feudalism came. Small production units and urban centers declined, and Europe witnessed a closed economy or economy of no outlet. In one hand, we can see the decline of central administration as a result of the rise of a parallel regional authority, and it resulted the rise of feudalism. In the words of Pirenne, without Muhammad, Charlemagne would be inconceivable. This argument has been questioned by several historians. R.S. Lopez, for instance, has pointed out that if we were to look a little more closely at the structure of Mediterranean commerce in the 8th and 9th centuries, we would find that long-distance trade did not come to an abrupt halt after the Arab conquests. Rather, many of the goods which Pirenne assumed were no longer imported into or exported from Europe were still being bought and sold. Lopez cites the example of papyrus, an important commodity in the trade between Egypt and Europe. Egypt, it may be recalled, had come under Arab rule by 642. The evidence suggests that, unlike what was thought earlier, the use of papyrus for writing was not entirely abundant in early medieval Europe. According to Lopez, long-term factors were responsible for the decline of long-distance trade in general and Mediterranean trade in particular. In 1930s, German historian Alphonse Dobbs also tried to criticize Pirenne. According to his theory, the decline of Mediterranean trade occurred in 9th century, not in 8th century. The reason was the shift of political center from Rome to the capitals of the barbarians. Dobbs also argued Not the Muslims but the barbarians like the Magyars and the Vikings were responsible for the decline of Mediterranean trade. In the latter days, the origin of feudal structure was explained from socio-political perspective. In this regard, we can name two famous historians, Marc Bloch and François Ganchoff. Bloch, a French historian whose works Feudal Society Volume 1 and 2 were written in the second quarter of the 20th century, had highlighted the role of the stirrup in the development of the Carolingian cavalry. He examined the impact of the stirrup on medieval warfare, also taking into account other innovations as for instance the horseshoe, which combined to make fighting on horseback more effective. Though Bloch gave due recognition to the stirrup, he held that the prominence given to mounted troops by the Franks was an evolution which had been going on for several centuries. Yet he was aware that the question deserved a more thorough investigation. He admitted that this phenomenon had not always been very well understood, partly because insufficient consideration had been given to certain technical factors. So then Bloch tried to concentrate on the feudal relationship, which was an impact of continuous invasions by the external powers. He says that after the Treaty of Verdun in 843 CE, the Carolingian Empire divided into three segments. After the decline of a centralized state, the foreign invasions occurred and stimulated the establishment of a new socio-political relationship, which was the base of feudal structure. In the absence of a central power, the regional rulers tried to protect the lives and property of the vassals of the peripheral areas. Thus, the vassalage system was established on the basis of lord-vassal relationship. So, for Bloch, the feudal society was a combination of vassalage system and manorialism. Feudal society was actually a result of political decentralization. But Ganchoff argued that in a centralized state, the existence of fief and vassalage system was possible. So for Ganchoff, feudal structure was a military political structure rather than a socio-political structure. In 1950s, George Dewey did not accept the view of Bloch that feudal structure was just a socio-political or military structure. He argued in his work, The Early Growth of the European Economy, Warriors and Peasants from the 7th to the 12th Century, that feudal structure was such a situation where the state was controlled by private institutions instead of public institutions. From the 10th century, the regional rulers were trying to apply their own regional rules, and as a result of that, the Carolingian rule became invalid. Then the regional rulers became powerful. So decentralization was not the result of feudalism, but feudalism was the result of decentralization of power. It occurred in the 10th century, not before that. Lynn White, in his path-breaking work published in 1962 on the subject Medieval Technology and Social Change, has advanced the novel hypothesis that the introduction of stirrup was one of the factors which led to the rise of feudalism. It qualitatively altered both the way in which the horse rider fought and the manner in which society was organized. According to White, the stirrup was the most important invention in the entire history of warfare before the coming of gunpowder. The stirrup gave the cavalry a tremendous strategic advantage. Till the introduction of the stirrup, horse riders had to press their knees against the body of the horse to maintain their balance while riding. If they did not put enough pressure with their knees, they would be in danger of falling off the horse. This made the job of fighting on horseback, particularly when the horse was in motion, very difficult. The stirrup allowed the rider to hold on to the horse with great ease. It needs to be understood that raising a cavalry was not an easy matter. Resources had to be found to meet these expenses. As centralized collection and disbursement of revenues for financing such a venture was out of the question, powerful lords were granted land for this purpose. It is true that for White, the stirrup was the starting point of those profound changes which led to the emergence of feudalism as a political and military system. It is for this reason that White has been criticized for his technical determinism, that is, making technique the determining or critical factor in social change. The transition to a cavalry-based army consisting of professional mounted warriors called knights in the medieval period was not completed till the 10th century. It was intimately tied up not just with technological changes, but also with the political structure and with the pattern of production and surplus. So the rise of feudal structure is connected with political, economic, social as well as military developments in Europe. So this is the end of our today's discussion. Subscribe our channel, comment and like our video. Listen to our podcast episodes. Follow our official Facebook page, Twitter handle and Instagram. For any query, feel free to mail us. For details, see the description.